Hey everyone, so we're going to continue on with this follow along website. Hopefully it's looking about like this at this point. So a bit of styling going on, our content in place. We have the about page going, rollovers working. If not, go back and watch the other videos and give it another shot, okay? But we're going to continue on and now try to work on the layout so it looks like how we want it to look. So let me bring up really quick where we're trying to get to. And so where we're trying to get to is going to look something like this, okay? So you can see here that the navigation is positioned a little bit better, the image is sized more appropriately, right? And then when we go to the about page, this image is sized appropriately, the links work better, and then even more valuable when we bring it in on responsive. So let's say this is a mobile phone. This is all looking how it's supposed to look and our home page. Now remember, on the completed example that I'm going to give you, there's more pages done. So there's like a form and things like that, but we're not, just for time's sake, we're only going to do so much on this follow along. But I encourage you, when you see the finished example, to deconstruct it and break it down and see if you can figure out how it's put together and working. You can kind of use it as a template. But this is where you should be right now as we're getting started, okay? So let's go ahead and jump in. We're not going to do responsive in this video. So responsive means that it responds to the size of the screen. So the layout changes as the browser size changes, as the screen size changes. Think of like your phone versus your desktop computer, okay? For now, we're just going to worry about the layout, but one of the things that you want to start looking at and thinking about is what the different screen sizes are. And so with that, we're going to go back to our old friend of W3 schools, right? And with that, you can actually look up screen sizes. Okay, so browser display statistics, and this will give you an idea of, as of January 2018, what are the most common screen sizes. So you do have some down here on the lower end, but for the most part, they're going to be up here, 1280 and above. So that's where we're going to be living when we think about desktop display, is we're going to be living above 1280. We're not going to worry too much about over here because it is so small. And if we're designing responsively, our content should still work well on that. If anything, it'll look like it does on mobile and we'll be okay. All right. But you want to keep that in consideration as that screen sizes change. Okay. So let's take a look real quick at our content. So up here we have our header is the top of the page. Within our header is our site ID and navigation. We have our main image here. And we have our main content down here. And then we have our footer way down at the bottom. Okay, so just want to make sure you see that structure because that's what I'm going to be referring to as we move down the page. All right, so a note here is that you don't have to go full width. A lot of times people think we got to go big, we got to go full width. It really depends on your content. Sometimes full width can be overwhelming. Like right now, this image doesn't look too bad on my little laptop, right? But if I put it on a giant desktop computer, this full width image is going to be completely overwhelming, right? So full width isn't always the case, and there's ways that you can combine full width with a set width of certain elements, which is what we're going to be working towards, okay? What we're going to be thinking about in this case is we're going to go imagine it's like about 960 pixels wide, right? So if you're working on a 1280 screen or larger, we're going to be going for like a 960 wide website. So lots of breathing room on the sides. It's not going to take up the whole browser window of the images and content, all that stuff. Because could you imagine if this text here were running across 1400 pixels wide? You'd be like turning your head like a tennis match to read. It would be insane, okay? So we're going to think about 960 wide as we move down the page, okay? And we're going to keep it, this is a simple page, and we're going to make it work so that it translates to other screen sizes, okay? So let's go ahead and start up here in our header, okay? So up here, we don't want everything crammed to the sides anymore, all right? So we're going to add some padding to the top and bottom so that's not quite so crammed, okay? And so up here, right, in our header, we're going to add some padding, all right? So we're going to go padding, top, 10 pixels, and padding, bottom, 10 pixels, okay? And what that should do is give a little bit of breathing room around the sides of our screens. Okay, so you can see here, it just added a little bit of a nudge, all right, on the top and bottom so that our header isn't quite so tight, okay? Now, a note about padding that I want you to think about, okay? And that's that padding is kind of like stuffing a pillowcase. So if you think of this box here of our header as being the edges of the border are a pillow, all right? Padding is like stuffing the pillow. It actually makes it wider, okay? So what you want to think about there. All right, so what I want you to think about as you're adding your padding on is padding is kind of like stuffing a pillow, all right? So CSS runs on a box model, okay? So if this is our box here, we get a border, right? That's that yellow line, and borders can have different widths to them. This black line here is the size of our actual container or our div, okay? So when you add padding, you're stuffing the container. It's actually getting a little bit bigger. It's getting bigger and taller. If I took out this green line, that black border would shrink in a little bit, right? And then you have your content, which is your width and your height. The margin is like moving the pillow around. It's not changing the width and the height, okay? So margin is like moving the pillow left and right. Border, all right, is the thickness of your pillowcase. Padding is like stuffing the pillowcase with more stuffing. And then the content is the pillow itself inside the case, okay? So the reason why I want you to think about that is because sometimes you'll add padding and you'll wonder why something got larger. And it's because you're like adding more stuffing in your pillow. And if what you're trying to do is move something left, right, up, down, you use margin to do that, okay? Not padding, all right? So something I want you to start to wrap your head around here because we're going to see this come up over and over and over again, okay? So back to where we are here, we added some padding on top and padding on bottom, okay? So we just kind of give it a little more room, and that actually increased the size a bit, okay? Now the size here is based on the height that we've given different things. So if this has a height and then these, that's what the size is based on, right? So you'll see at some point we're going to move this navigation up over here, and the header actually gets shorter because of that, right? Like when you see here, the header's actually shorter, okay? So let's keep working our way down, okay? So the next thing that we want to do is, let's say we want to make sure that the header extends across the entire width of the page, okay? So for that, we're going to come back in the header, and we can set that width to make sure it's always consistent. On this, we're going to give it a width of 100%. So what that means is the header will always go all the way across the page, all right? It's never going to be less than whatever our width is. So if we bring it in, our width is there. Bring it out, it's still 100% width of the page, okay? All right, so this sets the width to whatever element we are talking to is the parent container. All right, now this is where it gets confusing. You have to start to understand parent-child relationship, okay? What you're looking for is the container that wraps around the content, the div that you're talking to, all right? So here we have header. So the parent container of header is wrapper. Okay, wrapper is the next div up. Body is the parent to everything, okay? And wrapper has multiple children, right? We have header, we have main image, we have main content. So wrapper is the parent container of header and everything else on the page right now, okay? So if I gave wrapper a width, let's say I gave it a width of 960 pixels, all right? Then the 100% of my header would be 960 pixels wide, right? Because it's going to be based off of the width of the parent container, okay? So when we look at our page, as we've added padding and some things in here, okay, one of the things that I want you to look at is at some point, if you're adding padding, it can make that overall box larger, right? So if I'm adding padding to, let's say I add padding left, right? I want to move everything over a little bit, right? So I do a padding left on my header again so that I can slide this whole thing over a little bit, okay? Let's say I add a padding left of just 10 pixels, okay? And I slide it over, all right? Do you see how this horizontal scroll bar appeared? It's because I stuffed my pillow, right? I moved it over. So this header is actually wider than my screen, okay? So there's a little trick that you can do to make it so that the browser doesn't allow that to happen. It doesn't create this horizontal scroll bar, okay? And as most things with CSS, and it's gonna drive you nuts, there's 18 different ways to get to the same answer, okay? This one is what we're going to do is we're going to add padding without increasing the size of it, okay? And how we do that is we take what we added the padding to, and we're going to do a method called box sizing, and we're going to say it's border box, okay? And that's going to make it so that it doesn't get larger. Do you see how that horizontal scroll bar disappeared now? Okay, if yours didn't, just go ahead and do a command R to reload the page, refresh the page, or do this, and that'll help like remind it what you're working on, okay? And you always want to save as you go so that it's reading the proper code as you go, okay? So that'll get rid of that horizontal scroll bar because horizontal scroll bars are bad. It means you have content like tucked over here that nobody can see, okay? Now, some browsers automatically do this. They automatically have the box sizing border box built into it. All right. So for many elements, you may do something and you won't see that horizontal scroll bar and go, huh? And then you'll open in another browser and then all of a sudden it will appear. Okay. So you can add this in as you go and it'll help do that error prevention. All right. Now I want you to just sit and watch this for a second. Don't do this part because I'm just going to show you how it works. All right. So I had mentioned that the parent container, the width is based off of the parent. All right. So imagine if I wanted this whole page, right, to be 960 wide, but I didn't want to do it through body because I wanted the body to have a background color on it so that the bars going down the side had like a background or something. Okay. Here what I can do is I can talk to the parent around everything. I had mentioned that earlier. So here I can do wrapper. Okay. And I can do a max width saying at any point I don't want it any bigger than 960 pixels. Now if you give it a width of 960 pixels, when you bring the screen in, it's going to still be 960 pixels. Okay. When you do a max width, all right, it says it can shrink in, but it can never grow bigger than 960 pixels. So you can see here what that did. That made my whole window smaller, right? My whole content area smaller and everything matched to fit. This is actually my body, right? This is actually my body, all right? So up here, for example, I can show you, if I made this the color red, you'll see it easier, right? That's the body. This is the wrapper of all the page content. This is the header that we just sized. That's 100% width of its parent container wrapper, which is 960 pixels wide at max within the body with this red background. All right. And then you could center up the page. So that's a quick way to lock in the width and make everything else match. Okay. Now we're not going to do that in this case. I just wanted to show you how easy it is to do it that way. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and take out the width. So I hope you didn't follow along with that. If you did, you got to backtrack. All right. Now we're back to where we were. All right. We don't want it to push everything in like that. We want certain things like our background stripes and things like that to extend across the screen, but our content areas to be smaller than that. All right. So what we're going to do here is we're going to start to think about the boxes as we move down the page. So remember I said header, main image, main content, footer, right? And we want to look at how those boxes stack up and talk to what's in each of those div container boxes. All right. So up here on the header, all right, we are going to go ahead and start with our H1 tag over here. All right, so we're going to start over here with the logo. It's still really crammed. Like I added a little bit of padding on there, but it's not great yet, okay? So first thing that we want to do is we're going to give that a width. So here we're at header H1. We're in this, we've created a property to call upon, all right? And here we're going to go width, and let's go ahead and give it 360 pixels wide. All right, now how did I know that? How did I know I'm going to give it 360 pixels wide? Off of my wireframe. Because I did a wireframe, I have a basic idea of what I want things to look like. Now, things will always change once you go into development mode, right? But you have a basic idea coming in. You could also give this a percentage, all right? So that's the width. You can see it's giving me, brackets gives me a little helper, okay? So that's given it a width there. You can also go, if you want to, a percentage instead. So let's say I wanted it to be 50% of whatever my browser screen is. You can see it extended all the way out there. Okay. Now the only problem with that is as we go responsive, if I come in past 50%, it jumps down. All right. Do you see that? So if you don't want that, don't do it that way. Okay. But you can go either way for now. For me, if I want to do a percentage on this, because I don't want these, when I bring them up, I don't want them to hang way out over here. all right, I would probably go like maybe a 30%, right? And that would make it so that it's never quite too small. But if you want to lock the width at a certain width, you go pixels. You do something like 360 pixels, right? And what you'll see there is as we come in, it just doesn't change, right? If I did a percentage, it would change and wrap. Okay. Now this is okay for me because once we come into mobile, we're actually going to do something different and make a responsive mobile menu. All right. But for now, we'll just leave it as 360 pixels. Hopefully you're starting to see how all of this fits together and works. All right. Now we want to bump it in a little bit. All right. So we did it off of the overall header as one method to show you. We can also do it off of the H1 itself. And so here I'm just going to do a margin left. Remember, just sliding that pillow over, not increasing its size. You can see here, it just bumped it in 30 pixels. All right, so you can make that as many pixels as you want. You can do that as a percentage. You could bump it over 20%. All right, but what you have to remember as the screen size changes, right, 20% of 100 pixels is different than 20% of 1,000 pixels, right? So as the screen size changes, that's going to respond, which may or may not be what you want it to do. For now, we're just going to leave it at 30 pixels, give it a little more space, okay? And then on here, we're going to stop there with the header and we're going to come back to this part later, all right, when we start to do our responsive layout, because this is where it's going to be the heaviest lifting on that. So we're going to do that in a separate video. But at least that should give you the idea of how to start positioning things and moving things, okay? So let's start coming down into our main image, all right? Right now, it is full width, right? Now that may seem like what we want, but it's actually not a lot of breathing room. You can see it's really kind of overwhelming here. I can hardly get it all into my screen. So we don't actually want that, okay? Likewise, on our About page, you'll see that the image is way too small. All right? Also not what we want. Now, a warning on this, right, is that this is bad practice to actually take an image that's way too small and stretch it to increase it. Now, if you remember going back to bitmap images, a pixel is a pixel is a pixel. If you take these pixels and stretch them to fit more pixels, it degrades the quality of the image. All right, so I just want a reminder there that this is bad practice to do this. We would normally want a larger image that is either sized directly to what we're going to present it as or slightly oversized. And why don't you want to go as huge as possible? Because you still have to load the darn thing, right? So if you go too big, that's a lot of data that people have to use to load it, okay? So you want to keep it appropriately sized. I just want to show you what happens as we do this, of what happens when an image is too large and you're sizing it down or too small and you're sizing it up, that it really, how you code it is all the same, okay? So let's come in and I'm going to take you back to the home page here. So we need to work with this ID, all right? So going down our HTML, you can see here, that's under our main image ID, and that's holding the image, all right? So we haven't actually worked with that yet, right? So we got to go in there and make it happen. So I'm going to put it underneath my nav and before main content in my CSS. It's good to organize your CSS kind of in the flow of your page. It helps you find things, right? So if I were to put image way down underneath footer, it gets a little complex to find things later as I'm working quickly and adjusting. So you kind of want to put your CSS in the flow of the natural flow of the page anyway, all right? So here I'm going to call my ID main image. All right, now I want the container to be 100%. All right, because what I'm going for here, you can see in our file product, is that container stretches all the way across, but the image within it is sized down. All right, so we need main image to have a width of 100%, and that's going to be 100% of the parent, which right now is the same width as our browser. Okay, so for now, it looks the same, right? Nothing changed. But now that we've given the parent of the image a width, we can now size the image based on that, all right? So let's go ahead and call on that ID. So we're going to talk to the image within main image. Now you could give this its own class or ID, the image itself. Another way to do it is you can go main image, img, space img, and basically we're saying within the ID of main image, which within that div, we're talking the img tag, right? Okay, so here, let's give this a width, all right? And this is where we'll start to see the sizing change. All right, so 80%, we'll go 80% of it. You can see it brought it in. See how it's 80% of the width of the overall container? Everybody see that? And it brought the height up naturally. Now, most of the time when you're working with browsers, you're talking to the width more than the height, because height gets complicated, right? This is a landscape window. It's more wide than it is vertical. When I come into a phone screen is more, this is portrait. This is more vertical than it is wide. Okay, so most of the time, you might do some things with height as you go down your layout and get more advanced, but for the most part, you're going to be living in width world for a lot of it. Okay, so here we go. This is here, but now I want it centered up. It's off to the left. Now there are a ton of different ways to center things and position things. I'm going to show you one method, and it's called Flexbox. And so Flexbox, what it does is it turns the container into a flexible container with flexible items within that container so that you can lay them out horizontally or vertically. All right. It also makes it much easier to respond. It's considered more responsive. But imagine if I had more items in here. Okay. So we're not going to do this in this follow along tutorial at all, but I encourage you to break it down. For example, here's three columns and rows, 3 rows. Okay. As I come in responding, do you see how it becomes one column and they all stack? All right. That's done using Flexbox. And in old code world, that was extremely complicated to do. It just got really tricky and inconsistent. With Flexbox, super consistent, all right, and very similar to something called grid, okay? So you'll hear lots of different positioning rules. The most current, right, you might hear inline block layout, table layout, things like that. The most current is grid and Flexbox. Okay, and so that's what we're going to be using Flexbox for this to make it happen. Grid layout divides things also into columns and rows and is meant for more columns and rows than what we're doing. Flexbox is better for we're using this one row and we're talking to within that row as opposed to a stack of things based off of each other. Okay, so what we do is we look at the parent container. All right, we look at the parent container is what becomes the flexible container. So in this case, it is main image. All right, so the parent container of our image is what it becomes the flexible container. So that's here, main image. And to make it a flex box is pretty simple. You just go display, flex. Okay, that's all. Nothing changed yet. All right, now what we want to do is we can position things in this. Okay, so we've basically said, hey, this container is now a row. If it had 2 things in it, they would automatically go side by side. Okay, unless we tell them to stack. All right, so all we're going to start with here is just centering something. We're just going to position it. And so we're going to go justify, content, center. Okay, justify content takes the main axis. In this case, we have a row. And so the main axis on a row is going to be horizontal, okay? Look how it just immediately centered it up. No problem. Now, if we wanted it to center vertically, all right, that would be the perpendicular axis, and that we're going to do align items center, all right? So we're saying justify content, take that content and center, align items center. Now, on Blackboard, I've added in, or in class, depending on where you are, I've added in some articles that you can look at if you want to learn more about Flexbox. It looks tricky at first, but once you get used to it, it's so much simpler than other ways of doing things, okay? Than the other ways that you can position things, okay? So now we've got this all centered up. 1 line, 2 lines of code, all centered up. And you can even do things, they have all sorts of different positioning in Flexbox. So center is one positioning. You can see that there's flex end, flex start, right? Space around and space between would be if you're using multiple columns and you want them spread a certain way. Like for us, we're not even going to see it because we only have one, right? But look, if I did flex start, it's going to take it to the start of the flex box, which is on the left. Or flex end will take it to the right of the end of the flexible container, right? So we're going to leave that centered. Okay. All right. So now we've got our image centered and we're all happy there. Okay. So now we're going to keep working down the page and we're going to get to our H2. All right. So just to be clear on this, all right, we have the main image container here is 100% width. Okay. Our image itself is 80% width. And then we've centered the image within its parent div. All right. So the other thing I want you to look at is on the About page, it did the same thing. This is what the power of CSS is. You can take one CSS, right, cascading style sheet, add it to multiple pages, and if your structure is the same, if it's similar with the same divs and the same IDs and classes used, it will apply in the same way. So we didn't have to come in here and do anything special, right, for Gestalt here, okay? All we did was keep our structure of the HTML the same and consistent throughout our site, and our CSS in a simple way takes care of two different problems and makes them look in the same layout, okay? So that's the power of great HTML structuring. And I think people gloss over that and spend too little time on really good HTML structuring, that it gets them into problems later. So you really want to be careful with it, okay? So next up, what we're going to do is we're going to talk to this H2 tag down here and make it look how we want to look. So you can see where we're heading here is we're going to slide it down a little bit, position it a little bit differently, okay? That's where we're heading to. Now, we've already called on H2 because it has a style applied to it, but where is it? Where is it? All right, if you can't find it, Command F, and you just type in H2, and then it'll take you right to it, okay? So let's go ahead, and what I want to do first is it's just overall too tight, all right? So we're going to add some padding to it, all right? So here we're going to go padding, 20 pixels, top, 30 pixels, 20 pixels, 30 pixels. And what that does is that's a simple way to write padding top, padding right, padding bottom, padding left. And so it always goes top, right, bottom, left, all right? And that just kind of opened it up a little bit more. Everybody see that? But again, here we go. We got our buddy, the horizontal scroll bar, because we padded our pillow. See, it grew too much. It grew too much, all right? So what do we have to do? Box, sizing, border, box, all right? And then refresh the page if it didn't pick up, and now you can see that horizontal scroll bar is gone. It said, oh, I'm not supposed to grow with the padding, and it just stopped. It just locked it to the page, okay? So if you want to move the H2 down, you could always do something like add margin to it or things like that. There's lots of different ways to get to that white bar. We're going to look at one way to do it. All right, but you have to see the boxes, how they're structured. So we want this separated from the image. All right, so you think about what it's within. So this H2 is within main content. Okay, so that's what we're going to be talking to here. All right, so down here, we actually already have main content going. Remember I said you kind of keep within the flow of the page. All right, so on main content, we're going to add some padding. So we're basically going to take main content and give it a little more, nudge some stuff around within it, make it a little, give it some padding, add some stuffing to it, okay? And so in this, we're just going to go padding top, 10 pixels, padding bottom, 10 pixels, all right? And so we just gave it a little bit of breathing room. See that? It just nudged down a touch, okay? And that's all that we were looking for, is something really simple, all right? Now the white background shows up. If you wanted this to look differently, you would give main content a different color background, and then that's what you would see as you nudge around. Okay. All right. So now we're going to keep moving down the page. And here we've got, oh, look at that text spread all the way across the page, crammed, not looking great at all. Okay. So what we're going to do here is we're going to use this P tag, right? So we've done our H2. Now we've got P tags. We have two of them, but when we talk to one, we talk to both. Same thing. Okay. So here we're going to come into main content. In the same way we talked to the image that we just sized up above, we're going to go main content, and I want to talk to the P tags within the main content div. All right. Now, like I said, you could give each one of these an ID in class, but this is the easy way to talk to all P tags within this div and make them the same. All right. Why make more work for yourself when you can do it all at once? And so here what we're going to do is we're just going to add a bit of padding on this. And give that a little bit of breathing room, okay? And so you can see it just opened up them a little bit more, okay? And it keeps it consistent. This way, if we were to keep adding P tags, they would all be spaced the same way down the page, and it keeps it really consistent, okay? So we've got that done, all right? Now we want to make sure that no matter what, it is not as wide, okay? And we want to make sure it also stays left aligned, because this kind of text centered is actually very hard to read, right? So first thing we're going to do is just do a simple text align left. That'll make sure our P tags always are left aligned. That it's never going to center up, right? And then we're going to make it a width of 80%. Okay, so you can see that brought that in, right? We have a little more room. It's a little more comfortable to read. Okay, you can always change that width and keep playing with it. What I like about the 80% is that it's going to line up nicely with our image above, which is also 80% of the browser window. Okay. All right, so now to center it up, we're going to do the same thing with our flex box. Now, what's the parent container? It's not the P tag, right? We're not going to display flex the P tag. We're going to display flex main content. That's our parent container. All right, so here on main content, we're going to go display, flex. You remember this from above, justify, content, center, align, items, center. Okay? All right. Oh no, what did it do? Okay. This is because we actually have 3 children in the parent container of main content. All right, so as soon as you make it display flex, it goes, oh, 3 columns, 1, 2, 3. Take the children, line them up in a row. That's what it's trying to do. We have to tell it, oh, hey, this isn't a row. We want them to stack in a column, okay? So the default of a display flex is a row. We have to tell it that it's a column, all right? Now that's pretty one line of code, really simple. We're still in main content in our flex container, and we're going to tell it, hey, you're a column. So we go flex, direction, column. Okay. Get my browser window back up here. And there you can see it stacked them up again. All right. So hopefully, I know that's a tricky concept. Okay. The more you work with Flexbox, the easier that gets. But we've said you're not a row. If I made this instead of a row, all right, that's a row. All right, stacks them up side by side automatically. 1, 2, 3 children. H2, P are all the 3 children of our flex container main content. All right, that makes it a row, or we can go column, and that says the children, instead of being lined up in a row, are going to line themselves up in a column, and it stacks them up. And there's one other fun thing that you can do here is you can make a row reverse or a column reverse. So here, it flips everything upside down. Right? Where that's handy is if you have stacks of columns and rows and you want things alternating. All right, that's where that's handy. Okay? We're just going to leave it as a column though because we actually don't want it upside down. All right, so this is where you should be. Okay? So last up on our page, yay, we've got our footer. We've got our footer. Okay, so our footer is just crammed way too tight, right? Just way too tight. All right, so we've already styled the footer a bit, so it's down here at the bottom. Let me bring it up for you so you can see it a little bit easier. All right, so the first thing we're just going to do, keep it real simple. We're just going to give it a height. I'm going to go 50 pixels. All right, so that just gives it a nicer height. No big deal. And then once again, we want to align it better than this because it's still really tight on the top. So you could just add a margin to the top and that would bring it down, or add a padding to the top and that would bring it down, right, on this copyright symbol within our footer. All right, what we are going to do is, once again, we're going to make it a flex container. And the beautiful part about flex containers is that they're really consistent across browser sizes. So we'll do a display, flex, justify, content, center. Now things are already centered because of text align. All right, so that's not going to look very different. On this case, we wanted to align perpendicular as well. So that's the align items center. Okay. And there we go. Looks a little bit nicer down there at the bottom. Okay. So that's our page and it's looking pretty good, except for our nav. Things are looking consistent. Okay. Let's check our about page. Yep. Looking consistent, except for right here. I don't like that styling. I want to change it up a little bit more. So we're just going to do a little bit of stuff over here. We're going to still live in the same CSS document, right? Nothing will change on our home page because this element is not on our home page. So it's only going to talk to the about page elements, okay? So here, let's come into our main content UL, all right? Now we might have to create a new one. Let me check to see if it's here. So we'll just go UL. There's only one, so we haven't used this before, okay? So we need to talk to it. So I'm going to come in right near my main content, my other things with main content. Again, keep it consistent on the page. And we're going to go main content UL. for our unordered list. All right, so now let me pull up, if you haven't already, pull up and open your About HTML so you can see the structure that we're talking to. All right, so here we are. We're still in main content, okay? Remember, our H2 styling applied to both, so we're solid there. Our column styling applied to all of it, so we're solid there. But our UL isn't styled well, and so that's what's still within main content. We have this unordered list. So the parent is main content, and then we have the unordered list with list items within it, okay, that are different links. So over here, we've got main content UL, all right, unordered list, all right. Let's go ahead and keep our width consistent. If you remember, we've been using 80% of our window pretty consistently, okay. All right, so that moved everything over because we now gave it a width, okay. So now what we want to do is center things up, right? So here we're now going to, again, use display, flex, okay. Oh, lined them up, all right. So what do we need to do? We need to do our flex direction column, okay. That should have stacked them back up again, okay. And there they are, they're stacked back up again. So right now all we've done is set it up for positioning. We haven't actually positioned anything yet. So let's do our justify, content, center, and align items, center, okay? Now that should look a lot better, okay? So there we go there, all right? Now we want to talk to our list items and kind of give them a little more space, right? This is where we're heading towards, right? We're heading towards this. Right, looks a little bit nicer, right? So here, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to add some padding around each of these. We're going to fluff them up a little bit, add some padding, okay? So here, I'm going to go main content list items. You could add UL, LI. Really, the top level parent always listens, right? So if these are the LIs within main content, they'll always listen. If you did UL there because that's the parent of the list items, that'll work too, but you don't need to do that, okay? We're going to add padding around them, so we're going to go padding top 5 pixels and padding bottom 5 pixels, okay? And so that just gave them a little more space there. All right, looking a little nicer, okay? We also want to add horizontal lines between them, all right, just to give them some separation. And so here what we're going to do is we're just going to go border, top, solid, 1 pixel, and then we want to use that nice green color that we've been using throughout. So we're going to go C3D490 on our hex code, and hex codes are web speak for colors, all right? So you can actually, if you have a color that you know from like Photoshop and you have the RGB of it, you can Google hex code and it'll give you they give you lots of simulators that you can plug in things to find other colors. So that's really helpful. Okay. All right. So let's see where we are. All right. Now the lines are only spread the width of our actual words. So we want the lines to spread out further. So to do that, we have to give our list items a width. So here, let's give them a width of 50%, see how it looks. All right, there we go. So that's all taken care of. All right, so now they're a consistent width. All right, but doing that, left aligned our words again. All right, so we're just going to keep that really simple. It's just text, and we're going to go text, align, center. Okay, and there we go. All right, now I know you're probably saying to yourself, God, how many ways are there to center things up, right? Well, there's lots of different ways to center things up. And so we could go in and make those flex boxes and all that, but really they're just one line of text, so that's when you can use text align center. When you're trying to line up multiple things, that's when you go for flex box, okay? So now things are looking pretty good on the page, and I think we're ready to move on to solidifying our responsive design.